is both internal and external to the ANC. Empirical evidence suggests that counter-revolution is deeply entrenched within the ranks of the organization, with a clear objective to destroy the ANC. We will come back to this question later. There are also organizational factors within the ANC which served the interests of counter-revolution and provided the necessary conditions for the intensification of its counter-revolutionary activities. This presentation looks at the political developments of the preceding years, and its conclusions are drawn mostly from an analysis of ANC documents themselves. The analysis of these events and documents leads to the conclusion that there are factors, acts of commission or non-commission within the ranks of the ANC, which provided the fertile soil and created the necessary conditions for the counter-revolution to launch its offensive. There is no doubt that the victory of the National Democratic Revolution in 1994, the forces of counter-revolution have been regrouping and waiting for the opportune moment to launch their counter-offensive to undermine the National Democratic Revolution. Consequently, based on the empirical evidence before us, the presentation draws the conclusion that the outcome of the May 29 election represents a threat both to the ANC and the National Democratic Revolution. Charles Tilly, an American sociologist and political scientist, writes in his seminal work, The Analysis of a Counter-Revolution. I quote him, "A theory of revolution or an analysis of a specific revolution which provides no understanding of the presence of counter-revolutionary forces in the midst of a society in revolt must leave us unsatisfied. If a theory purports to tell us when and why a society is ready for rebellion, it also ought to tell us which sectors of the society will resist the rebellion and why." In another paper, which was co-authored by Intenteni, Comrades Mongane Wali Sirote, Dr. Snuki Zigalala, the late Aziz Pahad, and Faisal Randera in May 2019, under the heading on counter-revolution, state capture and corruption in South Africa, we defined counter-revolution in these terms. Counter-revolution is the commission or omission of any activity which deliberately seeks to undermine and eventually defeat the objectives of the National Democratic Revolution. It has historically manifested itself in different ways in different countries, depending on the complex interplay of local and international balance of forces. The ANC's electoral performance, 1994 to 2024. This part is very, very important, comrades, because it begins to give you context that leads us to the state of affairs in which we are today. It was the best of times and the worst of times. In the 1994 general election, may I have water, please? In the 1994 general election, thank you, Chief, thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. In the 1994 general election, the ANC got 62.6% of the votes cast. This increased to 66.3% in the 1999 general elections, rising to 69.6% in the 2004 elections. During the period 2004 and 2019, covering 4 general elections, ANC support declined by 12.9%, from 69.6% of votes cast to 57.5%. During each of these elections, total voter support for the ANC never dropped below 10 million, moving downwards from 10.8 in 2004 to 10 million in 2019. However, between 2019 and 2024 elections, ANC support dropped by a whopping 17.3%, from 57.5 to 40.1%. For the first time since 1994, the ANC vote dropped below 10 million, reaching the remarkable figure of 6.4 million. Why have the masses been deserting the ANC? It is not true that these masses have been turning their backs on the ANC during the entire period of 30 years since 1994, as the stats that I've presented here demonstrate. We believe that it is not difficult to identify the reasons for this increasing support for the ANC during our country's first 3 democratic elections. The simple reason was that during these years, the socio-economic situation in our country was changing for the better, directly benefiting the masses of the people. Dr. Andres's first age. On the 20th of July 2023, the CEO of the Institute of Race Relations, John Andres, addressed the Cato Institute in Washington, D.C., United States of America, in which he said, amongst other things, South Africa's first age from 1994 to 2007 was marked by considerable progress across a range of indicators. GDP grew at an average rate of 3.6%. The number of people with jobs increased from 8 million to 14 million. The average GDP per capita increased by almost 40%, from 55,000 rands per year to 76,000 rands per year in real terms, after adjusting for inflation. To this we can add the immense social wage which accrued to the ordinary people in such forms as housing, clean water, electricity, and social security. We can therefore justifiably claim that during the 1999 and 2004 elections, the masses continued to vote for the governing party, the ANC, because it has lived up to its promise of bringing a better life to the people. In the same document to which we have referred, Dr. Andres says, we're getting to the waste of times. By contrast, for the period 2008 to 2022, the average GDP growth rate was a lackluster 1.2%. The number of people with jobs increased by barely 1 million, by barely a million over a period of 14 years, while the population grew by 10 million over the same period. GDP per capita declined by 1,600 rands as people became poorer in real terms. The unemployment rate has crept up over the years and now sits at an astonishing 32.9%, up from 22.6% in 2008, or 42.4% on the expanded definition that includes discouraged job seekers. Even these bleak employment numbers are generously assessed as they include both formal and informal employment. Business indicators show a similarly stark divide. The lack of investment by private and public sector has started affecting the infrastructure that forms the backbone of the country's economic activity. While the total amount of electricity produced rose from 170 terawatts in 1995 to 253 terawatts in 2007 during the first age, an increase of 49%. It declined from there to barely 209 terawatts hours in 2022, a drop of almost 18%. Factually, what Dr. Andres says about the period from 2008 is correct. Second age and ANC loss of support. It therefore stands to reason that it would be rational to conclude that the governing party during this period, the ANC, would consistently lose support of the people exactly because of its failure during this period to meet its commitment to bring a better life to the people. Are we still together, comrades? Are you still following? You still with me? Thank you very much. I move on. I am quoting an article, and this is very, very important, as you will notice, that most of what I'm presenting is not thumbsuck ideas by Tamintendeni. We are quoting from actual ANC documents and other comments by other people, some of whom may not necessarily be very friendly to the ANC. I'm now quoting an article by Piet Kroukamp. Piet Kroukamp says in this article, on the 17th of May 2024, Piet Kroukamp published an article in the online Vrye Weekblad entitled Power in the Age of Cyril the Silent. Among other things, the article says, Ramaphosa is in a strong position within his party, or probably much stronger than in December 2017 when he took over from Jacob Zuma as president of the ANC and in 2018 as president of South Africa. But since then, 1.4 million more people have become unemployed. The economy refuses to grow, and inflation is north of the Reserve Bank's expectations. Under Ramaphosa, South Africa has reached new lows on the Corruption Perception Index, 83rd out of 180 countries. In 2019, the national debt burden as a percentage of GDP was 56%, but now it stands at 75.5%. Crime especially violent crime, is growing exponentially. In the year Ramaphosa became president, just over 21,000 people were murdered, 34 people per 100,000. But by 2023, there were 27,274 murders, 46 per 100,000. Of the nearly 80 people who are killed every day, 8 to 10 of their next of kin can expect justice. As for the rest, the murderer walks smugly away from his misconduct. The fact is, South Africans are experiencing the unthinkable and are significantly worse off with Ramaphosa at the helm than they were under the corrupt Zuma, writes Krukamp. Tell no lies and claim no easy victories. Amilcar Cabral. However, as the ANC, we are a revolutionary movement and need to dig deeper to understand the processes which have led to the disastrous 2024 election results. In this context, we must explain what happened to explain the radical difference between ages 1 and 2, especially given that the ANC was the governing party during both ages. What went wrong? The answer to this question must be honest and without any equivocation or prevarication. The National Democratic Revolution, its aims and objectives. Understanding the National Democratic Revolution. The National Democratic Revolution can only be understood within the context of the historical experience of colonialism, its evolution over time, and the brutal exploitation of the indigenous population. Their systemic exclusion from all institutions of state power, deprivation of education, the use of legislation such as job reservation to disadvantage black people. I quote a little bit from this book, which is a history of inequality in South Africa, 1652 to 2002, by Saint-Peter Blanche. According to Professor Saint-Peter Blanche, I quote, "We are at the end of one epoch and the beginning of a new one, but the old will cast an ugly shadow over the new one for a long time to come. We cannot build the new epoch without a clear understanding of the old." Ter Blanche continues, "The white people should acknowledge explicitly that they have benefited from colonialism, segregation, and apartheid, and that most black South Africans have been victims of these systems. White South Africans should also show an awareness of the almost insoluble nature of the problems they have bequeathed to the democratically elected government. The process, which started with the arrival at the Cape of the Dutch settlers in 1652, resulted in transforming our country into a settler colonial state, what was called colonialism of a special type. As a settler colonial state, ours did not differ from how similar settler colonial states, such as the United States and Israel, behaved towards the indigenous population. Simply, the settler colonial state dispossesses the indigenous population of its country, hands it over as the property of the settlers, and treats the indigenous population as subordinate subhumans. The difference between us and the United States is that our indigenous population remained by far the overwhelming majority relative to the settlers. That is what made it possible for this majority to rise up, to end the settler colonial state, and in our case, to proclaim that South Africa belongs to all who live in it, black